Tycoon Rich took his new lover home, but his ex-wife and triplets were already living there. The rain was falling gently over Seoul's skyline, painting the windows of the black luxury car that glided through the winding roads toward the hills, toward a home long forgotten by love. Inside the car, Kang Joon-ho sat silently, his eyes focused ahead, arms crossed over his sharp suit. He was the very image of power, South Korea's youngest tycoon, heir to a massive conglomerate, revered in boardrooms and feared in courtrooms. But tonight, something was different in him. A quiet anticipation stirred beneath his calm exterior. It wasn't business he was returning to. It was home. Beside him sat Seo Min-ji, poised and beautiful in her tailored beige coat. Her fingers twirled around the diamond bracelet he'd given her the week before. She smiled, soft and calculated. "Is this the house you mentioned?" she asked, her voice smooth like silk. "The one you said you'd never return to?" Joon-ho didn't answer right away. He stared out at the entrance gates approaching, lined with cherry blossoms not yet in bloom. "I had it renovated," he finally replied. "Stripped everything out. The old memories, the old rooms, everything." Min-ji tilted her head. "Good. We don't need any ghosts in our new life together." The car rolled to a stop. Joon-ho stepped out first, adjusting his cuffs. He looked up at the massive estate, his father's legacy, later abandoned when his marriage fell apart. He had sworn never to return, but he was tired of sterile hotel suites and empty penthouses. He was ready to start over, not just in business, in life. Min-ji followed, linking her arm through his. "Let's see our future," she whispered. Joon-ho nodded. The door opened at his touch. No staff. He had dismissed them for the night. He wanted the first step into his new chapter to be quiet, intimate. But the house wasn't silent. There were footsteps, soft pattering sounds, children. Joon-ho frowned, then laughter. Innocent, unbothered, piercing through the cold halls of his past. He took a few more steps forward, heart thudding, until he turned the corner into the living room, and froze. There she was, Yoon Ji-won, standing barefoot in the center of the room, folding tiny clothes by the fireplace. Her long hair tied up, cheeks flushed from the heat. She looked up, and her world stopped too. Their eyes met. It was as if time unspooled itself backward, to the vows, to the nights when they had dreamed together, to the morning she had left, with nothing but tears in her throat and life inside her belly. Min-ji gasped behind him. Who is she?" But Ji-won didn't move. She stared at Joon-ho like she was seeing a ghost. Her voice trembled. "Why are you here?" He stepped forward, slowly, like a man wading into water he thought had dried up long ago. "This is my house," he said coldly, though his voice cracked at the edges. Ji-won blinked, her arms instinctively wrapped around herself. "No, this house, it belonged to my grandmother. She left it to me. I have the papers. I'm not trespassing." He scoffed, but it wasn't arrogance. It was confusion, pain, and the sick realization that something was wrong. Very wrong. "Your grandmother died years ago. The house was sold." "There was a mistake," she said, her tone rising. "The deed was contested. It was finally cleared this year. The court gave it back to me. I didn't know it was you who had bought it back. I wouldn't have." Just then, small footsteps ran down the hallway. 3 little children, triplets, 1 boy, 2 girls, all with soft, chestnut hair, bright, curious eyes. The boy clutched a tiny car in his hand. "Amma, who are they?" Ji-won froze. Joon-ho stared at the children, eyes widening. It was like looking into a mirror. The boy's eyebrows, the girl's nose, the way one of them stood with her hands behind her back. It was him. He stumbled backward slightly. What is this?" he whispered. Min-ji was frozen in place, jaw clenched. "Joon-ho, those kids, they look like..." Ji-won knelt beside them protectively. Her hands trembled. "They're mine," she said softly. He stared at her. "Yours? Or ours?" Silence. A long, unbearable silence. Ji-won bit her lip. Her eyes welled up with tears. "You didn't want to hear me back then. she whispered. You signed the papers. You said you didn't care anymore. I was scared. Alone. I wanted to tell you, but you wouldn't even look at me. He was shaking his head. That's not possible. They're 5 years old, she said quietly. Born 7 months after you left. Junho's world tilted. The walls, once familiar, now mocked him. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. He looked down at the boy again. The child tilted his head, just like he used to do when confused. Ji-won stood, arms firm around her children. I never asked you for anything, she said. Not once. I built a life for them, alone. I came back to this house because it was safe, because it was ours, mine and theirs, not yours. Junho turned away, unable to face her eyes. You should have told me, she laughed, bitter and broken. Would you have listened? Minji stepped forward, trying to reclaim ground. Junho, this is insane. You brought me here to start our life. He looked at her like he didn't recognize her anymore. I didn't know they were here. I didn't know. Then let's go, she said, clinging to his arm. You said this house was full of ghosts. Let's leave them. He looked back at Ji-won, at the children now staring at him with wary eyes. One of the girls smiled. Appa? She said, tilting her head. Ji-won gasped and knelt down again. No, sweetie, he's... But Junho was already on his knees in front of the child, his hands trembling. He didn't know what to say, didn't know how to breathe. He just looked at her, and the other two, and he felt something break open in him. A dam, a wound, a second chance. But it was too early to know if redemption had room to grow in this house, or if this was just the beginning of a storm greater than any of them were ready for. Shall we continue with topic 2 next? Você diz. Certo? Agora tu como narrador e storyteller desenvolva a história sem marcos com o nome de cada tópico que for desenvolve. Me conte sobre o tópico tu com dialogo como su faço espectador. Sempre lembrando de desenvolver com muita moco. Com muitos sentimentos de forma que a estrutura de narrativa utiliza uma linha temporal linear de modo o espectador sentir o que o personagem está sentindo amigos. Com 6.000 characters o ChatGPT diz. Of course. Now let me guide you through the continuation of this emotional journey. Topic 2. Unfolding in a linear, dramatic narrative. As though you were watching a deeply moving Korean drama. This chapter captures the emotional weight of returning to a home that is no longer yours alone, of a heart pulled in 2 directions, pride and regret. The next morning came too soon. Golden light slipped between the tall curtains of the living room windows, falling softly across the expensive marble floors. But nothing felt luxurious anymore. There was a heaviness in the air, a quiet unease that clung to every breath. Kang Junho stood at the top of the stairs, staring down at the unfamiliar familiarity of the house. His house, or what he thought was his house. Now, it felt like something else entirely, like a memory he wasn't sure belonged to him anymore. From the kitchen came the sound of soft humming. Children's laughter followed. He moved toward the sound, slowly, like he was intruding on someone else's life. In the kitchen, Yoon Ji-won was tying aprons around the children's waists. Pancakes sizzled in the pan. The twins, Harin and Sohyun, were trying to crack eggs, while their brother Taejun concentrated on stirring a bowl that was much too big for his little arms. None of them noticed him standing in the doorway. Ji-won's face was relaxed. She laughed when Harin dropped half an eggshell into the batter. She looked happy. Something twisted in Junho's chest. He remembered, for a moment, what that laughter used to sound like when it belonged to him. Back when they shared mornings, when Ji-won used to kiss his cheek while brushing flour from her fingers. Before everything had been shattered by mistrust, pride, and silence. Taejun spotted him first. The boy's big brown eyes widened, spoon still in hand. "Amma," he whispered. "He's here." Ji-won turned. Their eyes met again. This time, there were no explosions, no accusations, just the tired quiet of 2 people who once knew each other completely, and now stood as strangers in their own story. She gently wiped her hands on her apron. "Would you like some breakfast?" she asked, her voice soft but guarded. "I don't know," Junho said. "I didn't expect to wake up here." "You did," she replied. He stepped inside, unsure of his place. The children watched him curiously, but they didn't speak. They sensed the tension. Minji didn't come down. She had locked herself in the guest suite after last night's shock, refusing to talk. Ji-won handed him a cup of coffee. Their fingers didn't touch. "Did you sleep well?" she asked. "No, neither did I." The silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. "I should have known," he finally said. "The moment I saw them." Ji-won sipped her coffee. "They look like you. They act like me," he said. Watching Taejun, who now sat cross-legged on the kitchen floor, organizing crayons by color. "I used to do that. Obsess over order." "You still do," Ji-won said quietly. He looked at her, startled by the softness in her voice, but she didn't meet his eyes. "I thought I erased this place," he muttered, looking around. "I thought if I changed the walls, the tiles, the windows, I could forget everything." Ji-won glanced up. "But some things don't change." He nodded slowly. "No, they don't." The children went to the living room to watch cartoons, their tiny feet padding over the floor. Junho sat down at the kitchen island. He looked like a man who hadn't faced the truth in years. And now that it stood in front of him, in the form of 3 living, breathing souls, he didn't know how to carry it. "I wasn't ready to be a father," he whispered, staring into his coffee. Ji-won's hands froze mid-motion. "I was scared," he continued, "of everything, of the responsibility, of losing control. I thought you betrayed me. I didn't even let you explain." "No, you didn't. I hated you," he said, his voice breaking, "because hating you was easier than admitting I still loved you." Ji-won looked away. Her eyes were full of unshed tears. "I tried to tell you," she said, "so many times. I wrote letters. I waited at your office. But your secretary, your guards, they turned me away. Every time." He stared at her, guilt crashing down like a wave. "I didn't know. You didn't want to know." She took a deep breath, fighting to keep herself from falling apart. "I had to be both mother and father. I worked at night, cleaned homes, taught piano. There were days I didn't eat just so they could. I watched them take their first steps, speak their first words all alone." Tears slid down her cheeks now, silently. "And all that time," she continued, "you were on magazine covers, building towers, toasting champagne. With her." He felt sick. "I wasn't thinking," he said, more to himself than to her. "I thought if I built more, achieved more, it would fill the hole." "Did it?" He didn't answer. She walked past him, poured juice for the children, wiped her eyes and kept moving, as if emotions were a luxury she could no longer afford. "Why this house?" he asked quietly. Ji-won paused. "It was the only place that ever felt safe," she replied. "Before the world taught me how cruel it could be." He stood. "I didn't come here to fight you, Ji-won. I wanted a new beginning." She finally looked at him. "Then maybe you should start by understanding the ending you never stayed for." He swallowed hard. She walked toward the living room, where the children were calling her. "Amma, come sit." She turned her head slightly toward him. "You can stay for now, but we don't need you here. Don't confuse your guilt with purpose." With that, she disappeared down the hallway, her hair swaying softly behind her. Junho stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the scent of pancakes and the ghosts of what could have been. The house, once cold and empty, was full of life now, but none of it belonged to him. He stood by the large windows in his study, the one room Ji-won hadn't touched. It was still his. The mahogany shelves, the untouched books, the leather chair where he once sat reviewing contracts late into the night. It smelled faintly of cigar and memory. From below, he heard laughter, children's laughter. It wrapped around his chest like a memory he never had, or perhaps one he had let slip through his fingers. And then he heard her voice. Ji-won. She was calling Taejun to put his shoes on properly. Left foot, sweetheart. That's the right one. Try again. You can do it. Her voice hadn't changed. Still warm. Still endlessly patient. Even after everything. He closed his eyes. And for a second, he let himself wonder how different life would have been if he had just asked her to explain, back then. But he hadn't, because pride had shouted louder than love. Later that evening, he sat at the edge of the dining room while Ji-won fed the kids. Eat slowly, she reminded them gently. And no talking with your mouth full. Min-ji hadn't come down all day. Her absence was a silent thunder in the house. Junho cleared his throat. I can take care of dinner tomorrow, he offered awkwardly. Ji-won didn't look at him. We're fine. I cook every night. I mean for all of us, he insisted. She glanced at him, unsure what game he was playing now. I don't want the children getting used to something that isn't real. What if I want it to be real? The room fell still. So-hyun looked up with wide eyes. Amma, is Appa staying with us now? Ji-won forced a smile and stroked her daughter's hair. He's just visiting, darling. Taejun furrowed his brows. But he's like us. His eyes are like mine. Ji-won's hand trembled. Junho spoke softly, kneeling beside his son. Do you like dinosaurs? The boy lit up. Yes, Tyrannosaurus Rex is my favorite. Junho smiled, surprised by the sudden warmth in his own voice. Mine too. He looked up at Ji-won, and in her eyes, he saw hesitation and fear. That night, he couldn't sleep. Again, he paced the balcony, the city lights flickering in the distance like silent witnesses to his confusion and shame. A box lay on the floor in the hallway. Someone had moved it from the attic. Curious, he knelt and opened it. Inside were old photos. Their photos. Ji-won in her wedding dress, laughing, leaning into him like the world was weightless. A picture of them at the beach. Her arms wrapped around his neck, sand between their toes. And then, an envelope, unsealed, a letter never sent. He hesitated. Then he read, Junho, I know you won't read this, but I need to write it anyway, even if it ends up in the trash. I didn't betray you. I didn't lie. I loved you, even when you looked at me like a stranger. Even when you walked away before I could say the words. I'm pregnant. I found out the day after the divorce papers were delivered. I sat in the clinic holding the test, and for a second, I thought I would run to you. But I didn't, because by then you had already replaced me. With silence, with pride, with someone else. I hope someday you understand that silence can kill more than anger ever will. Goodbye. He clutched the paper in shaking hands. The breath left his lungs. He had destroyed something that was never broken, only bruised. A sudden knock broke his trance. He turned. It was Ji-won, standing in the hallway, arms crossed. Don't read my letters. He looked at her, hair tied back in a loose bun, eyes red with exhaustion, but glowing with a quiet fire that hadn't died even after all these years. I didn't mean to, he said. It was just there, and I needed to know. She walked into the room, slowly, her footsteps light but purposeful. Know what? She asked. That I cried for you for months? That I talked to the ceiling like a madwoman, begging for an explanation you never gave me? Or that I held 3 babies in my arms and whispered your name even when I hated you? He stood, his voice low and broken. I thought you left me. No, she said. You left me, and you closed every door behind you. I made a mistake. She laughed bitterly. No, you made a choice. The silence was unbearable. I didn't know how to come back, he said finally. Not after what I did. Ji-won shook her head. You don't get to come back just because you regret it. That's not how time works. He reached out, slowly, carefully, and placed the letter on the table. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness, he whispered. I just want to be part of their lives, even if I stand at the edge. Her eyes softened for a moment, then hardened again. You say that now, she replied. But what about when it gets complicated? When Min-ji gets jealous? When the tabloids find out? I'll protect them. You didn't protect me. He had no answer, only silence. She turned to go, but paused at the door. Taejun drew a picture of you today, she said. He said you looked like a lion. Brave. Strong. She looked over her shoulder. Don't prove him wrong. And then she disappeared into the hallway. Junho stood alone, heart pounding, letter still trembling in his hands. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling through the trees. Inside, a man who once had everything was finally beginning to understand the weight of everything he'd lost, and what he might still have a chance to earn, if he dared to fight not for his pride, but for love, for family. Junho walked downstairs slowly, his footsteps soft, not wanting to disturb the calm. The triplets were already awake, seated in the living room with a colorful blanket spread out beneath them like a picnic. Taejun was building towers with wooden blocks, Harin was brushing her doll's hair, and Sohyun was drawing with crayons. And each of them, in their own quiet way, looked at peace. But Jiwon was nowhere in sight. Junho cleared his throat. "Good morning," he said, his voice tentative. 3 little faces turned to him. Sohyun grinned. "Good morning, Lion Appa." He blinked. "Lion Appa?" Taejun nodded. "I told her you looked like a lion, brave and strong." Harin tugged at her braid. "But not scary. Not anymore." Something in Junho's chest pulled tight. He crouched beside them, unsure whether he was allowed to touch this world. It felt like a bubble, too pure to belong to him. "Can I draw with you?" he asked softly. The children nodded eagerly. Sohyun handed him a red crayon. As he drew, a messy, barely recognizable sun. He heard footsteps from the back corridor. He looked up and saw Jiwon walking into the room, her eyes already on him. She paused when she saw the scene before her. Her children surrounding the man who had once broken her in the most silent, cruel way. She didn't speak, but she didn't stop him either. He stood up slowly. "I need to speak with you." She nodded once. "Follow me." They stepped into the hallway, away from crayons and innocent smiles, into the raw silence that only adults know how to carry. She led him to a side room he hadn't even remembered existed, a sunroom his father had built long ago. The light streamed in through wide windows, bathing her in soft morning glow. He closed the door behind them. "What do you want to say now?" she asked, arms crossed, walls up. "I looked through the house deed," he began. "I had my lawyer pull everything. He confirmed what you said. The house was under your grandmother's name before it was sold. The legal mix-up. It was real. This place was always yours." Jiwon blinked, stunned for a moment by his honesty. "I didn't expect you to admit that." "I know." He took a breath. "And I also know I don't have any right to be here." Jiwon didn't respond. "But I want to stay." Her eyes snapped to his. "Stay? In this house? For the children," he said quickly. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not even asking you to talk to me. But I want to wake up and hear them laughing. I want to hear Taejun's questions and see Sohyun's drawings. I want to help Harin fix her doll's hair even if I have no idea how." Jiwon looked down at her hands. "And Minji. She doesn't belong here." Her breath caught in her throat. "You brought her here. You planned a life with her in this house. I didn't know this house would bring me back to this," he whispered. "To you. To them." Silence. Heavy. Delicate. Dangerous. Jiwon swallowed hard. "I should have told you when I was pregnant. I should have fought harder." He shook his head. "No. I was the one who refused to listen. You knocked on my door, and I told them to turn you away. You wrote to me, and I told them to throw the letters away. You didn't fail me. I failed you." Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them back. "This isn't just about us anymore." "I know. That's why I'm not walking away this time." Her lips trembled. "You think being present now makes up for 5 years of absence?" "No," he said softly. "But maybe it's a start." She turned her face away, afraid he'd see the crack in her armor. "You can stay," she said finally. "For now. But don't confuse their smiles with forgiveness. Children are easy to love, harder to deserve." He nodded. "I'll earn it. All of it." She looked at him for a long, long time. then turned and left the room. Later that afternoon, the quiet peace shattered. The doorbell rang, loud, sharp. Junho opened it. Seo Minji stood there, sunglasses covering her eyes, but nothing could hide the fury in her posture. "We need to talk," she hissed, stepping inside before he could say no. Ji-won appeared in the hallway, instantly protective. Minji removed her sunglasses, revealing red-rimmed eyes. "So this is your new life? With her and her litter of children? Watch your mouth," Ji-won snapped. Minji turned to her. "I was with him when he was at his lowest. I held him together. I watched him drown in silence because of what you did." "What I did?" Ji-won's voice rose. "He walked away. He refused to listen." "You manipulated him," Minji spat. "Played the victim. Showed up here conveniently with children that look like him. Because they are his." Minji's face went white. Junho stepped between them. "That's enough. Minji, leave." Her voice cracked. "You told me you wanted a new beginning. You promised me. I didn't know what I was missing. Don't you dare do this to me, Junho," she growled, eyes glittering. "I gave up everything for you. And I gave up everything that mattered for a lie," he said coldly. "Don't make me say more." Minji's lip trembled, but she held her head high. "Fine," she said. "You want her? The forgotten wife with her second-hand life? Keep it. But don't come crawling back when she tears you apart again." She turned, heels echoing like gunshots on the marble floor, and slammed the door behind her. Ji-won stared at the door long after she was gone. "I didn't ask you to choose me," she said quietly. "I know," Junho replied. "But I finally chose something real." She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The damage was already done. Again. But this time, maybe, just maybe, healing had finally begun. Junho stood in the kitchen alone, staring at the untouched plate of rice and soup Ji-won had left for him on the counter. He hadn't been able to eat. Not after Minji's outburst. Not after the way Ji-won had looked at him. Not with anger, but with a deep and haunting weariness. Like she had been tired for far too long. He reached for the chopsticks, but his hands were trembling. And before he could take a bite, he heard footsteps. Ji-won appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. Her hair was damp from the shower. She wore a simple sweater and sweatpants, but to him, she looked like the strongest person in the world. "You didn't eat," she said. "I wasn't hungry," he replied quietly. She walked to the other side of the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water. The sound of it filled the silence like a song neither of them knew the words to. "She's not coming back," Junho said suddenly. "I figured," Ji-won answered without turning around. "I sent her away." Ji-won looked over her shoulder. "You brought her into this house." "I didn't know you were here," he said, shame sinking into his voice. "I didn't know about the children. I didn't know anything. But I know now. Do you?" Her voice was soft, but there was steel beneath it. "Do you really understand what you walked away from?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. She sighed and leaned against the counter. "You always said this house was just a place," she continued. "But it wasn't to me. It was the last place we were happy. The last time you touched me like I mattered. Before the late meetings. Before the cold stares. Before the silence started eating us alive. I was drowning," he said, "and I thought you were the one holding me down. I was trying to save you." He took a step forward, slowly. "And now," she met his eyes, "now I'm just trying to stay afloat." The clock on the wall ticked loudly. He whispered, "I read something once. That regret doesn't shout. It whispers. At night, when no one else is listening." Ji-won looked down at the floor. "Then maybe you should have listened before it was too late." He took another step forward. "Is it too late?" She didn't answer, because she didn't know. That night, she lay awake in her room, the children asleep beside her. Their breathing was even, their faces peaceful. She ran her fingers through Taejun's hair and whispered a silent prayer for strength. Across the hall, Junho couldn't sleep either. He stood on the balcony, watching the city lights blur through the rain. He pulled out his phone and stared at an old photo, a candid one from years ago. Ji-won asleep on the couch, curled up, with one hand resting on her belly. It was taken weeks before the divorce. He had kept it and forgotten it existed. A photo of a moment he never knew was precious until it was gone. He looked out again at the darkened city. "I didn't just lose her," he murmured. "I lost myself." The next morning came too fast. It was Saturday. The kids ran through the halls with unmatched energy, chasing one another with wooden swords and paper crowns. Ji-won was in the garden, pulling weeds from the small flower bed that her grandmother had once loved. Junho stepped outside quietly. She didn't look up. "Do you remember the apricot tree?" he asked after a moment. Ji-won glanced toward the edge of the yard. The tree was still there, though older now, bent and a little tired. "You planted it," she said. "You said it would bear fruit by the time we had kids." He smiled faintly. "Looks like it kept its promise." She didn't smile. Instead, she stood and wiped her hands on her jeans. "Why are you really here, Junho?" "I told you," he said. "For the kids." "No," she said firmly. "Don't use them as a shield. Why are you here? In this house? With me? After everything?" He looked at her, drenched in morning light, face bare of makeup, eyes raw with emotion. "I don't know who I became after you left," he said. "I thought I was doing the right thing, moving on, working harder, building higher. But every floor I added to my life just made it feel more hollow." He stepped closer. "When I saw you again, when I saw them, it was like breathing after years underwater." Ji-won swallowed hard. "You're too late." "Maybe I am," he whispered. "But that doesn't mean I can't spend every day showing them. Showing you that I still remember how to love." She stared at him, tears forming but refusing to fall. "I don't need promises," she said. "I won't give any," he replied. Silence. The wind rustled through the apricot tree. Ji-won looked away, heart pounding. "I have a meeting downtown," she said, suddenly cold again. "The kids have swimming class at 2. Don't let them eat too much before." She walked past him toward the house, but as she passed, she paused. "Don't be late," she added softly, without turning around, and for the first time in years, a flicker of something returned to her voice. Something like hope. Junho exhaled, his hands trembling. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. A beginning, or maybe a chance. A door he once slammed shut now slightly open again. And somewhere in the background, the sound of children laughing echoed like the promise of a future not yet written. Ji-won had left earlier for her meeting, her departure quiet but firm. There had been no glance back, no soft goodbyes. Only a short nod, as if to say, "This is your test. Let's see if you pass it." Junho sat awkwardly on the carpet, legs folded, trying to assemble a puzzle with the kids. He was more used to spreadsheets and boardrooms than matching cartoon animal shapes. But something about the way Taejun leaned against him without hesitation, or how So-hyun quietly placed her little hand on his knee, made the moment feel like breathing in a language he once knew but had forgotten. "I like you," Harin said suddenly. He turned to her, startled. "You do." She nodded seriously, her pigtails bouncing. "You're quiet like me." So-hyun tilted her head. "Do quiet people love more?" Taejun frowned. "Love is loud, like Umma's voice when she reads stories." Junho's throat tightened. "I think love can be both. Loud when it needs to protect, and quiet when it needs to stay." The children considered that wide-eyed, as if he'd just told them the secret of the universe. Later, when he was cleaning up the toys and folding the blanket, he heard So-hyun whisper behind him, "Are you staying forever?" He turned slowly. She stood there holding a crumpled drawing for stick figures. A woman, 3 children, and a man. The man had lion ears. "I want to," he said. "But Amma said maybe not," she replied softly. "She said sometimes people go again." He knelt in front of her. "Sometimes they do," he admitted, "because they're afraid, or confused, or they forget what matters." So-hyun looked up, her voice barely a breath. Are you afraid? Yes, he whispered. Very. She blinked. Of No, he said with a sad smile. Of losing you. Again. She stepped forward and hugged him. Small arms around his neck, heart against his chest. And he held her like she was the most fragile part of the world. That night, the silence in the house was different. Not hostile, not cold, just waiting. Ji-won returned just after sunset. The front door creaked open, and the children ran to her like stars returning to the sky. She looked exhausted, eyes shadowed. But when she saw the three of them huddled around Junho's legs, her expression faltered. Taejun didn't cry, Harin said proudly, even when he bumped his knee. And Appa put medicine, So-hyun added. Ji-won blinked. Appa. She hadn't taught them to call him that, had never even said the word in his presence. But there it was, from their mouths freely given. A name she had once feared they'd never know. She nodded slowly. That's good. Junho stood, unsure if he should speak, unsure if he was allowed. They were incredible today, he said. They surprised me. Ji-won raised an eyebrow. They do that. I want to help more. She crossed her arms. We're not a project. I know, he said quickly. This isn't business. I don't want to manage this. Then what do you want, Junho? She asked, voice sharp. He paused. Then, a second chance. Even if it's slow. Even if it takes years. She looked at him a long time, too long. Then quietly turned away. You should rest. It's been a long day. He watched her go, each step deliberate, back straight. A queen in a crumbling castle trying to hold her ground. Hours later, the house was dark. The children asleep. But Ji-won sat in the laundry room folding clothes, her hands moving on autopilot. Junho knocked lightly on the doorframe. She didn't look up. There's something I need to tell you, he said. She paused, still not meeting his gaze. He stepped inside. It's about Min-ji. She tensed. She knew, he said softly. About the children. About you. Ji-won turned to him now, face frozen. What? She saw a photo of you with them. Months ago. She hid it. Kept it from me. Ji-won's lips parted, but no sound came. She said she didn't want to lose me, so she made sure I stayed blind. The silence that followed was electric. Betrayal seeping back into her skin like a familiar poison. You brought her into our home, she said, voice trembling. You kissed her under the same roof your children slept. I didn't know. But she did, Ji-won snapped. And you let her in. I'm sorry. That doesn't erase it. I know, he whispered. But I had to tell you. Her eyes shimmered with rage. And something worse, hurt, old and deep. I survived being forgotten once, Junho. I won't do it again. You won't have to. She shook her head, her voice breaking. Don't make promises. Just don't. And for the first time since his return, she walked away not out of anger, but because staying there, in that room, might have broken her. He was left alone again, in a house full of life, and yet, still haunted by everything he had destroyed with silence. The question hung heavy in the air. Was love enough to rebuild what trust had once carried? Or had he come too late to a story that no longer needed him? Junho stood in the doorway of the children's room, silently watching them sleep. Their breaths were slow, synchronized, 3 small hearts beating in the same rhythm. Taejun had kicked off his blanket again. Harin was curled around her stuffed rabbit, and So-hyun. Her little hand rested on a drawing taped to the wall. A family of 4, him, Ji-won, and the kids. He hadn't known that love could sneak up like this. Not with fire, but with quiet. With the weight of a child's arm resting on your shoulder. With the echo of soft laughter in rooms once cold. He turned to leave when a small voice broke the silence. Appa? It was So-hyun. She rubbed her eyes, blinking up at him with the kind of trust that makes grown men crumble. Can you stay until we wake up next time? His throat tightened. I can. Promise. He hesitated, then walked back and knelt by her side. I promise. She smiled and drifted back into sleep. Later that morning, Ji-won found him in the kitchen. He was trying and failing to make pancakes. The batter was too thick, the pan too hot, and one of the pancakes had already burned beyond saving. She leaned on the doorway, arms folded, watching. "You're using too much flour." He startled, then turned to her sheepishly. "I followed the recipe." "That's not the same thing as knowing what you're doing." He laughed, and it startled both of them. The sound was warm, lopsided, human. "I was trying to make breakfast for them." "They like your pancakes," she said, walking toward the counter. He looked at her. "They do. They said yours are fluffier." "That's because I flipped them too soon." She reached for the spatula, gently nudging him aside. "Let me show you." They stood shoulder to shoulder in front of the stove. It was too domestic, too intimate, and yet neither of them stepped back. He watched her movements, fluid, familiar, like a song her hands remembered even if her heart had forgotten. "You used to hum while you cooked," he said quietly. "I still do," she replied. "Why did you stop singing around me?" She paused, mid-flip. "I guess some songs don't belong to certain people anymore." That hurt, more than he expected, but she didn't mean it to be cruel. It was just the truth, clean and sharp like winter air. The kids ran in minutes later, dragging pillows and chaos behind them. "Pancakes!" Taejun shouted. "Appa made them." So-hyun beamed. Harin climbed onto the stool and sniffed dramatically. "They smell weird." Ji-won chuckled. "That's because he used flour meant for bread." "I'm learning," Junho said, holding up his hands. "Be kind to your chef." The triplets erupted in laughter, swarming around the table. As Ji-won poured juice into 3 mismatched cups, she caught Junho's eyes. "You're trying," she said softly. "I see that." He nodded. "I'll keep trying." After breakfast, Junho took the kids outside to the garden. Ji-won stayed behind, cleaning quietly, listening to the distant echoes of his voice. Awkward and endearing, as he played tag with them. The children shrieked with laughter. She closed her eyes, and for a second, just a breath, allowed herself to imagine it. What life might have been like if everything had gone differently. But that breath was stolen moments later, when the doorbell rang, again. And this time, it wasn't Minji. It was a man in a suit. Ji-won opened the door, startled. "Can I help you?" "Mrs. Yoon?" the man asked politely. "I'm from the regional court. This is for you." She froze. Her fingers shook as she took the envelope, sealed in red. "Wait, what is this about?" He bowed. "It's a formal notice. Your property rights have been reopened for review. There's a claim being filed on this residence." "What?" she asked, heart thudding. "That's not possible." "I suggest you speak with your attorney," the man said gently. "We're just the messengers." She stood frozen in the doorway, envelope in hand, watching the man disappear down the steps. When she opened the documents inside, her legs nearly gave out. Petition, a legal challenge to her ownership of the house, filed by a private equity firm, but the address traced back to one of Junho's subsidiaries. Her hands trembled violently. Outside, laughter continued. She could hear Taejun yelling, "You can't catch me, Appa!" and Junho's voice, deep and playful, echoing after him. But her heart was breaking open all over again. She walked to the garden, papers clenched in her hand. He was chasing the kids around the apricot tree, laughing, completely unaware. When he saw her face, his expression shifted instantly. "What is it?" he asked, walking toward her, breathless. She held out the envelope. "Tell me this isn't from you." He took it slowly. "Read it." His face drained of color. I didn't approve this," he said, voice strained. "I swear to you, Ji-won, I didn't know. But it came from your company." "I'll shut it down," he said. "I'll fix this." "You keep saying that," she whispered, eyes burning. "But the damage always arrives before your apologies." He stepped closer. "I'm not the man who left you 5 years ago." "No," she said bitterly. "That man hurt me once and walked away. You're hurting me while standing right beside me." The children had stopped playing. They were watching now, confused, small. Is Amma mad? So-hyun whispered. Ji-won turned to them, instantly softening. It's okay, sweethearts. Go inside. I'll be there in a minute. They hesitated, but listened. And when the door closed behind them, she let the storm inside her rise. I let you in, she said, voice trembling. I let you near my children. I let you see me. All of me. When I was still bruised from everything you left behind. I didn't know about this, he pleaded. You should have, she cried. If you really wanted to protect us, you would have made sure every door, every shadow of your world couldn't touch mine. I'll make this right. I don't want you to fix it, she cut in. I want you to understand what it feels like to constantly brace for the next wound. Tears fell now freely. He reached for her, but she stepped back. No more half-truths, no more broken intentions. She turned and walked toward the house. He stood in the garden, the laughter gone, the apricot tree rustling quietly behind him like an old witness to a tragedy repeating itself. And for the first time since he came back, he wondered, was love enough? Junho hadn't spoken since the incident in the garden. He stood now in the kitchen, staring at the refrigerator door like it could offer answers. His hands were clenched on the counter, his jaw tight, heart racing with a quiet fury that hadn't found a target yet. But it was close, too close. Ji-won finally broke the silence. Is this what I have to expect now? She asked without looking at him. Threats hiding under your name? Legal claims with your seal on them? And explanations that come too late? He stepped forward slowly. I told you, I didn't approve that challenge. I would never do that to you, not now. Not after. His voice faltered. After what? She said coldly. After deciding you missed your children? After realizing you liked the feeling of being needed again? He flinched at that. I came here to stay, he said quietly. Not to destroy what you've built. She stood now, walking toward the table, her movements sharp. You can't say that and still have your name signed beneath a document that threatens to take the roof off my children's heads. I didn't sign it, he said, voice rising. Minji did. Ji-won froze. What? He pulled out his phone and unlocked it with shaking fingers. She had access to the legal wing of the firm. It was supposed to be revoked after I removed her as head of acquisitions, but she must have slipped this in before the transition finalized. Look here. He opened an email, a scanned signature form, a digital timestamp. Ji-won stared at it, her hands slowly lowering from her sides. She used your company to come after me, she whispered. And she used my name to do it, he replied. She's not just angry. She's trying to burn everything I care about. Ji-won turned away, breathing heavily. She never left, did she? She asked. Not really. I ended things. Then why do I still feel like she's in this house? Because she wants you to feel that, he said, voice cracking. She's punishing me by punishing you. There was a long, pulsing silence between them. Then Ji-won whispered, I was right to be afraid. His face crumbled. I'm going to fix this. I'll file a withdrawal by tomorrow. I'll make a public statement if I have to. Ji-won looked at him now, really looked, and what she saw wasn't a monster or even a man in control. She saw someone cornered, torn between regret and responsibility, and it terrified her more than she wanted to admit. I don't want this kind of war around my children, she said. I don't want to wake up every day wondering if another grenade is hiding under our breakfast table. I swear. Don't swear. She cut him off, voice gentle now, but broken. Just be better, quietly, without needing to be seen. Her voice cracked. Be the kind of man I would have begged to stay, back then. She walked to the staircase, her hand tightening on the railing. And don't say anything else tonight, please. She disappeared upstairs. Junho stood in the center of the room, drowning in silence. His hands were shaking. He hadn't realized it until now. His phone buzzed, still in his palm. A message. Minji, you always underestimate me, don't you? You think love means forgiveness. But love without consequences is just pity. And I'm not someone to pity. He stared at the screen, numb. He deleted the message. The next morning, Ji-won found him asleep on the living room couch, fully dressed, one hand still holding a pen and a withdrawal letter half-signed on the table beside him. He had stayed up writing, trying. She picked up the pen, stared at the ink where it trailed off in exhaustion. For a second, just one heartbeat, she saw him not as the man who hurt her, but as the boy who once showed up at her university gate holding roses and ramen because he didn't know how to say "I missed you." She put the pen down. Later, when she returned from a walk with the kids, she found her neighbor at the gate. An older woman, curious eyes, arms crossed. "Heard your husband's back," the woman said, eyes darting toward the house. Ji-won hesitated. "He's the father of my children. You letting him stay?" Ji-won looked back at the house, at the windows, at the tree in the yard. "For now," the neighbor sniffed. "Brave girl, letting in what once broke you." Ji-won forced a smile. Sometimes the same hand that breaks you also learns how to hold you. She walked inside with the kids, their hands tangled in hers. Junho was in the kitchen, still in yesterday's clothes, trying to slice apples for their snacks. He looked up, startled. "I fixed it," he said. "The withdrawal was submitted at dawn." Ji-won nodded. "I'll deal with Min-ji," he added. "She already made her move," Ji-won replied. "Now it's my turn to protect them." His voice faltered. "Do you trust me to help?" "No," she said honestly. "But maybe one day, if you keep showing up for the right reasons, I'll learn how to." He swallowed the knot in his throat and looked down at the apples. One slice was too thick, another paper thin. He had no rhythm yet, but he was trying. And for the first time, Ji-won didn't stop him. She simply walked past, took out the juice cups and stood beside him. Not as his wife. Not yet. The children were upstairs in the bath, splashing water and fighting over the yellow duck, their voices echoing through the walls in bursts of pure, innocent chaos. Ji-won sat at the dining table with a pile of unfolded laundry in front of her. She wasn't folding, just touching the fabric, holding onto something solid. Junho walked in from the hallway, freshly changed. He'd finally shaved. His hair was still damp. He looked less like the man who had abandoned her, and more like the one who had once whispered promises against her shoulder. She didn't look up when he approached. He stood there for a moment, unsure, then sat across from her slowly. "I'm sorry for yesterday," he said, "and all the yesterdays before that." "You've said that," she murmured. "So many times I've lost count." "I know." He studied her face. Tired, still beautiful, still stormy. "I need to ask you something," he said carefully. Her fingers stilled on a small, mismatched sock. "What? Why didn't you ever come to me? When you had the babies?" She lifted her eyes now, slowly, and the look she gave him was colder than any winter he'd lived through. "Because I did." His breath caught. "What do you mean?" "I came to your office. Twice," she said. "The first time, your secretary told me you were in Dubai. You weren't. You were at a restaurant with her. The second time, I waited in the lobby for 4 hours. I saw you walk past me. You didn't even look." Junho's heart sank. His mind raced back. The winter after the divorce. A woman in a gray coat sitting in the corner chair. He'd been on the phone. In a rush. He hadn't looked. "I didn't know." "No," she whispered. "You didn't want to know." Her voice trembled now. "I carried 3 babies alone. I went into labor early. I nearly bled out, and I remember thinking, maybe it was better that way. Maybe it would be easier for them to never know you." He flinched. "But when they were born," she continued, "when I saw their faces, there was no more anger, only love and fear, so much fear, because I had nothing, and they had only me." "I'm sorry," he said again. "I was blind." "You were willfully blind," she replied. "And that's worse." There was silence, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with every moment she had held those babies in the dark. Every time she'd kissed a fevered forehead and whispered, "It's okay," when it wasn't. He reached for her hand across the table. She pulled. back. "Don't touch me," she said, but her voice cracked. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said, his own voice raw. "Just the truth." "You want the truth?" she asked. He nodded. She stood slowly, walked to the drawer, and pulled out a small box. She set it in front of him. He opened it. Inside were 4 letters, all dated 5 years ago, all unopened. He picked one up. "To Kong Junho, please read this before you let me go." "I left them with your mother," Ji-won said, arms crossed tightly across her chest. "She said she'd give them to you, but I guess she believed I was the enemy too." Junho stared at the letters, his chest burning. "She told me she never received them. She lied." He clenched the letter tightly, rage and grief warring inside him. "I had no idea," he whispered. "Ji-won, I never knew you tried." "I stopped trying," she said quietly, "because you made it clear that silence was your answer." He couldn't breathe. She turned to walk away, but this time he followed. In the hallway, he called out, "Why didn't you tell the children who I was?" She stopped. "I thought about it," she said, her back to him. "So many times." He waited. "But then I realized something." Her voice was steady, but it held the weight of years. "If I gave them your name, they might grow up wondering why you weren't there, why Appa never came, why he only existed in photos and stories." She turned now, eyes glassy. "So I gave them a father who was always watching, even if he wasn't real. A version of you that never left, that never yelled, that never broke me." He couldn't speak, couldn't even move. "I lied for their sake," she said. "Not to protect you, to protect them from what you were." A tear slipped down her cheek. "And now you're here, and they love you. They already love you, Junho. And that terrifies me, because if you leave again, if you even so much as hesitate again, they won't survive it." "I won't leave," he whispered. "Not this time." She stared at him, searching his face for something. A flaw, a weakness, a crack. "I'm not the woman you abandoned," she said. "I don't need you to survive. I don't want to be needed," he replied. "I want to be chosen." That stopped her, not because it was perfect, but because it was honest. She turned, slowly, and walked back into the children's room without another word. The door closed behind her. Junho sat alone in the study. The old letters from Ji-won still spread across the desk in front of him like shattered glass. He had read each one, every word, every page soaked in the ache of someone who had once pleaded for understanding and received only silence. He wanted to cry, but the tears didn't come. Instead, there was only a dull ache behind his eyes and the hollow sound of his own breath. His phone buzzed. A text from one of his executive assistants. "I'm sorry. You asked for anything connected to Minji's actions? I just found this. Check your email immediately." Heart pounding, he opened his laptop. There it was. An audio file. A conversation recorded, likely without consent, between Minji and a private investigator. He hesitated, then hit play. Manji, cold, confident, "No, I don't need him to know yet. Let him play house. Let him think he's in control. Just make sure the claim goes through quietly. I want that woman out of the house before she turns his heart soft." Investigator, "You sure about this? There are kids involved." Manji, "They're not mine." The file ended. Junho sat still for a long time, his hands clenched into fists, his jaw locked. He didn't realize he had stood up until his chair toppled over. His breath came faster now, and a rage unlike any he'd ever known burned through him. Not for himself, but for Ji-won, for the children, for all the time stolen, all the peace shattered by someone who never truly loved, only possessed. Without thinking, he walked straight to Ji-won's room. The hallway was silent. The only sound was the creak of the wooden floor beneath his steps. He knocked. Nothing. Then again. The door opened slowly. She stood there in a nightgown, half asleep, confusion in her eyes. Her hair was loose, cascading over her shoulders. "What is it?" she whispered, her voice still laced with sleep. "I need you to hear something," he said, breath shaking. Right now. Can it wait? No, that word came with something raw, something that made her follow him without another question. They sat across from each other in the study. He hit play and let her listen. Ji-won didn't move. Her face was unreadable. But when the final words faded, "They're not mine," her lips parted just slightly, and she closed her eyes. She breathed in, and when she opened them again, something had changed. "I knew," she said quietly. "Not the details, but I felt it. I knew she hadn't let go of you. She tried to destroy you," he whispered. Ji-won leaned back in the chair. "No, she tried to destroy who I used to be, but that woman no longer exists. I want to go to the police. I want to have her investigated for fraud, for falsifying documents, for harassment." Ji-won looked at him, long and hard. "You think justice will fix this?" "No," he said, "but it's a start." She shook her head slowly. "You still think everything can be solved with action, with plans. But some wounds don't need trials. They need time." His voice broke. "I should have protected you. You should have listened to me," she replied. "Back then, I was scared. So was I." They sat in silence. A long, painful, unspeakable silence. Then she whispered, "Why now? What do you mean? Why are you finally fighting for me?" He looked down, voice shaking. "Because when I saw her face in that recording, and the way she talked about you, about them, I realized I've been asleep. I've been living in a dream where I could fix things by simply showing up." He looked at her. "But you've been awake this whole time, carrying everything alone. And I want to carry it now, even if it's late, even if you never love me again." Ji-won stood slowly. Her fingers trembled as she reached for one of the letters she had written him all those years ago. She held it to her chest, then looked him in the eyes. "I don't know what this is between us anymore," she said. "It's not forgiveness. Not yet. But I don't hate you. Not the way I used to." His throat tightened. "And sometimes," she continued, "when I see the way the kids look at you, I start to wonder what would have happened if you just opened one of these back then." He stepped closer. "Maybe we'd still be together. Or maybe I'd be just as broken, but with fewer walls." They stood inches apart. No tears now. Just two people standing in the ruins of what once was, trying to find a path forward. Through the rubble, through the silence, through the hurt. "Will you let me try again?" he asked. Ji-won didn't answer. She simply turned the light off and left the room. But this time, Junho noticed it immediately. She hadn't spoken much since the night before, hadn't mentioned the recording again, hadn't asked what he did with it. She was walking beside him now, but always with that slight space between them, a distance that couldn't be crossed with words alone. As the kids left for school with the neighbor's driver, Junho watched them from the window, their small hands waving from the back seat. When the car disappeared down the street, he turned and found Ji-won gripping the edge of the counter, her knuckles white. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. She didn't look at him. "I'm just tired." "Why don't you rest?" he offered. "I'll clean up. Make lunch later." She shook her head, but then her body swayed, only a little, barely perceptible. But he saw it. "Ji-won?" "I'm fine," she said quickly, too quickly. "I didn't eat much yesterday. That's all." Still, her skin had lost its usual warmth. Her lips were pale. Her shoulders seemed to carry something invisible, not emotional this time, but physical. He stepped closer. "Have you been feeling like this often?" "Don't start," she muttered. "I'm asking because I care." "You care now," she snapped, finally looking at him. Her voice cracked like thin glass. "You care now that I've already built a life without you. Now that there's something here for you to fix." He stood frozen, and then her hand went to her chest. She winced. It was quick, like a flash of pain crossed her features before she masked it again. But he saw it. "You're not okay," he said quietly. "What is it?" "It's nothing." He stepped closer. "Tell me." She turned away. "You don't have the right to ask." "I don't care about rights anymore," he said, his voice trembling. "I care about you. Tell me." She didn't answer, just walked into the hallway, toward her room. But halfway there, her legs buckled. She caught herself against the wall, breathing heavily. "G1." He rushed forward and caught her just before she could collapse. "I'm fine," she gasped. "It's just dizzy." "You're not fine," he said, his arms wrapping around her gently. "I'm calling a doctor." "No," her voice was hoarse. "I don't want the kids to worry. Please, not here." He looked at her, panic pressing down on his chest. "Then I'll take you to the clinic. Now." Her eyes fluttered closed for a moment. Then she nodded. She didn't speak during the drive. She sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, hands folded tightly in her lap. Junho kept glancing at her, jaw clenched, his grip on the steering wheel white-knuckled. When they reached the clinic, she was too weak to argue. The doctor saw her immediately, and Junho was left outside, pacing the hallway like a man walking the edge of a cliff. Minutes passed, then half an hour. Finally, the doctor stepped out. Junho rushed forward. "How is she?" The doctor hesitated. "She should have come earlier," he said gently. "She's been under enormous stress, physically and emotionally. Her heart, it's showing signs of strain." Junho's stomach dropped. Her heart. She has an irregular rhythm, likely worsened by fatigue and tension. It's not critical yet, but if she keeps pushing herself like this, it could become dangerous. He nodded slowly, struggling to breathe. "She didn't tell anyone?" "She mentioned you," the doctor said, watching him carefully. "Said you didn't need to know unless it got worse. It already had. She'll need rest, real rest, low stress, and follow-up testing." He entered the room slowly. She was sitting on the hospital bed, eyes turned toward the window, fingers clutching the thin blanket. She didn't look at him when he walked in. "You knew," he said quietly. Still, she didn't move. "How long have you been hiding this?" "Since before you came back." His heart twisted. "Why?" She finally looked at him. Her eyes were full of something he hadn't seen in years, fear. Real, human, fragile fear. "Because I didn't want you to come back out of pity." He stepped closer. "You think that's why I stayed?" "I don't know why you stayed," she whispered. "You're still figuring that out too." He sat beside her slowly, gently, as if one wrong move would shatter her completely. "I stayed," he said, "because losing you once nearly broke me. Losing you again would end me." She turned her head. "I'm not dying." "No," he said, "but you're breaking, and I don't know how to hold the pieces without cutting myself on them." A tear slipped down her cheek, silent and sudden. "You always came back too late. I'm here now. Now might not be enough." He reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. "Then let me make now matter." Silence. Then her head gently rested against his shoulder. "I'm so tired," she whispered. "I know," he said. "I'll carry it for a while." She didn't answer, but she let him hold her there, in the quiet, while the monitor beeped softly beside them. The sound of a heart still fighting, still enduring, even after everything. And somewhere, deep inside, Junho made a silent vow. He would not let her carry this alone again. He began waking up early to prepare breakfast himself. He reminded G1 to take her medication, took charge of school pickups, and made sure she had moments of rest, even when she tried to resist. But one morning, while searching through a box of old books in the children's room, Taejun pulled something unexpected from the bottom of the pile. An envelope, yellowed and folded in half. His small fingers opened it curiously, his lips moving as he tried to read the cursive letters. He didn't understand it all, but he recognized his mother's name, and his father's. "Amma," he called. "I found a letter. Is this yours?" Ji-won was in bed, sitting up with a blanket draped across her legs. She smiled gently, thinking it was one of the children's drawings. But when she took the letter from Taejun's hands, her smile faded. Her fingers froze around the paper. It wasn't just any letter. It was the letter, the one she wrote during her first month of pregnancy, when the loneliness had been unbearable and her body still ached from the absence of a man who should have stayed. She never meant for it to be found. She had tucked it away, ashamed of how raw it was. Now she held it again. She opened it slowly, the paper trembling as much as her hands. Junho stepped into the room just then, carrying a cup of tea. He paused when he saw her expression. "What's wrong?" Ji-won didn't speak. She simply held out the letter. He took it, and as he read, his heart fell apart. Asterisk, you won't read this. I know that, but I need to write it anyway. I feel like a shadow in my own life. Every time I reach for the phone, I stop myself, because I know your voice won't come. I wanted to hate you. It would have been easier. But the truth is, I still love you. And it hurts. I saw our child today. On the ultrasound. Just a blur, really. A flicker of light. But they're alive. They exist. And they're part of you. I wonder what you'd say if you knew. I wonder if you'd even care. Asterisk by the time he reached the end. His eyes were red. His lips pressed tightly together, as if trying to hold back everything crashing through his chest. I never received this, he said quietly. I never, Ji-won. I wrote it on the kitchen floor, she whispered. That night I realized you weren't coming back. He sat beside her slowly, the letter still in his hand. I was wrong, he said, about everything. I know. I let pride convince me you didn't love me, that you were better off without me. I wasn't. She said it with no anger, only grief. Deep, buried grief that had never fully healed. You were my person, she said. Even when I hated you, you were still the one I wanted to call when the baby kicked. When I was scared. When I woke up crying and didn't know why. He bowed his head. And all that time, she continued, you were moving on, traveling, starting over. While I sat on the floor of a rented studio with my arms around my stomach, begging them to hold on. I would have come running if I'd known. But you didn't know, she said, her voice growing sharp, raw. Because you didn't want to know. Because it was easier to assume the worst of me than to open your heart. Tears spilled now from both of them. I was a coward, he whispered. I was so sure I'd been betrayed that I forgot how to love you. Silence stretched between them, until Ji-won said something he never expected to hear. I used to whisper your name while I slept. His head snapped up. I didn't know I was doing it, she continued. But when the babies were little, they'd hear me. One night, So-hyun said, Amma, who is Junho? He felt like something inside him cracked wide open. And I couldn't answer, she said, because I didn't know what you were to me anymore. A ghost? A scar? She looked at him now, eyes glistening. But lately, you feel like a person again. Junho reached across the small space between them and gently took her hand. She let him. I can't fix the past, he said, but I want to write a new letter, every day, with actions, with time, with presence. Ji-won looked down at their hands. Do you think we still have time? She whispered. I think, he said, his voice breaking, we have today, and maybe that's enough for now. She exhaled, slow and heavy, then leaned her head on his shoulder. Neither of them said another word. Ji-won rested more. Junho cooked clumsier meals with growing pride. The children laughed louder, and for the first time in years, their laughter didn't echo off cold walls. It filled rooms with warmth, grounding everything in the kind of joy that neither of them thought they'd ever feel again. But not all shadows had left. On a gray Wednesday afternoon, as Ji-won sat curled on the couch with Harin asleep against her chest, Junho received a call that made his stomach twist. He stepped into the hallway, lowering his voice. What do you mean she transferred the funds? He asked, tension sharp in every syllable. The voice on the other end, his chief financial officer, spoke cautiously. She accessed the Seoul corporate account. She had an old clearance code. We think she moved nearly 1.5 billion Korean wons into an offshore account 2 weeks ago, just before you officially revoked her access. Junho closed his eyes. His pulse thudded in his ears. Min-ji, he muttered. And that's not all, the CFO added. She also pulled employee records, including private information. One of the IT analysts confirmed she downloaded everything. including your legal team's files on the house. And Ji-won's medical records. Junho felt the air leave his lungs. What is she doing? He whispered. I don't know, but she's planning something. He hung up. When he walked back into the living room, his expression must have given everything away. Ji-won looked up immediately. What happened? He hesitated, then sat beside her slowly, careful not to wake her in. I need to tell you something, he said. Is it Minji? She asked, voice already tight. She accessed my accounts, transferred company money, took sensitive data. Ji-won's face paled. Data? Yours too. She stood, slowly moving Harin onto a blanket. What kind of data? Medical, he said quietly. Personal files. Documents about the house. Everything. Ji-won turned to him, her voice trembling. Why would she need my medical records? I don't know, he admitted. But I don't think this is about jealousy anymore. Ji-won's eyes clouded with something deeper now. Fear, laced with violation. She's trying to hurt me, she said softly. Not just us, me. I won't let her, he said. Ji-won began pacing. She always played smart, quiet. She didn't yell or threaten. She poisoned things. Slowly. We'll stop her, he said. I'll talk to the legal team. No, Ji-won turned suddenly. This isn't just about legal action. This is about my children. Our children. If she's capable of pulling medical records, she's capable of going further. He nodded, understanding. I want them safe, she said. I want this house protected. Cameras, locks, whatever it takes. I'll do it, he promised. She walked to the window. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I used to feel safe here. You will again. Ji-won looked over her shoulder at him. And if I don't? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood and crossed the room. He stopped just behind her. You asked me once why I came back, he said. She nodded slightly. I came back because I saw what I became without you, he said. Cold, shallow, soulless. And I couldn't live like that anymore. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't blink them away. If she comes for us again, she said quietly, I won't run. I won't let you stand alone. She turned to face him fully now. Her voice wavered. Then you have to understand something. Anything. If she tries to take what's mine, I'll fight like a mother who once gave birth in silence. I'll fight like a woman who learned to raise 3 children with an empty bank account and a heart full of broken trust. I know, he said, barely a whisper. And I'll protect them even from you if I have to. He looked into her eyes, not with guilt this time, but with something deeper, respect. You won't have to. Just then, the doorbell rang. They both tensed. Ji-won moved first, but Junho stopped her gently. Let me. He walked to the door, checked the monitor, then opened it cautiously. It was a courier. Simple, harmless. Delivery for Miss Yoon Ji-won. She stepped forward, confused. I didn't order anything. The man handed her a small package. No return address, no markings, just her name, handwritten in ink. Junho moved beside her. Don't open it here. She nodded. They set it on the kitchen table, then slowly peeled back the wrapping. Inside was a single manila envelope. Ji-won opened it and gasped. It was a printed photo, grainy, black and white, of her at the clinic, holding her chest, looking weak, vulnerable. On the back of the photo were 5 words, written in the same ink. Still think you're safe now? She covered her mouth with a trembling hand. Junho reached for the photo, fury rising in his chest like wildfire. I'll destroy her, he growled. But Ji-won was already walking away, not in fear, in purpose. She climbed the stairs, walked into her room, opened the drawer, and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside were documents she hadn't looked at in years, court rulings, real estate claims, handwritten statements. A record of everything she had survived. She turned to him as he entered. I don't want revenge, she said, but I won't live in fear again. He looked at her with awe. Behind her, the house was still. The children were asleep. And somewhere down the hall, Junho was too, or so she thought. She heard his steps before she saw him. He paused at the doorway, hesitant. "Can I come in?" She didn't turn. "You're already here." He walked in slowly, careful not to break the quiet. "I couldn't sleep," he said. "Neither could I." He stopped a few steps behind her. The moonlight painted silver lines across her face. "I keep playing that moment in my head," she said, eyes still on the dark yard. "That picture, the one she sent, the way I was standing, my hand on my chest. I remember that day. I was scared I'd faint alone in the lobby. There was no one to call." His voice came low, thick. "You should have called me." "I did. Not with my phone. But in my heart, I called you. Every day." She turned slowly now, finally facing him. "You didn't answer." He looked like he'd been struck. "I know." She studied him. "Why did you ignore me back then? Really? Was it just pride?" He took a breath, sat across from her. "It was pride, yes," he said. "But it was also fear. I thought if I faced you, I'd fall apart. And I didn't know how to break without witnesses. So I shut everything out. You shut me out. I thought I had to protect myself. You don't protect people by abandoning them." "Junho," she said, her voice shaking. He leaned forward. "I know that now. I learned it too late, but I learned it." She looked at him for a long moment, then whispered, "I'm afraid of letting you close again. I'm afraid of failing you again." Silence fell between them, but this time it didn't feel cruel. It felt full, like something was trying to be born inside it. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out something folded. "I want to give you this." She opened it carefully. Printed statement. Legal. Official. Ji-won read the header and her eyes widened. "What is this?" "I resigned today," he said softly. "From the board." She looked up at him, stunned. "You left your own company?" He nodded. "Sold my shares. Gave up my name on the masthead." "Why?" "Because I don't want my power to be the reason people hurt you. I don't want my wealth to be a weapon someone else can use. Not anymore." Tears pricked her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "You built that company, and I destroyed my family while building it." She folded the document and held it to her chest. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "I just wanted you to know. You're my beginning now, not a distraction, not a regret. You're the place I return to." Her shoulders shook then, not from sorrow, but from the weight of letting hope Indiana. He stood, but just as he turned toward the door, her voice stopped him. "Wait." He looked back. She walked to him slowly, stood inches away, and then, with a trembling hand, she reached for his. "I'm still afraid," she whispered. "I am too. But maybe," she said, eyes shining, "we can be afraid together." His fingers tightened gently around hers. "You once asked me if I'd have listened if you told me back then," he murmured. "I don't know, but I'm listening now." She nodded. "I believe you." They stood there, side by side in the dark, holding hands not like lovers yet, but like survivors of the same storm, realizing they had both been drowning in silence, and now maybe they could teach each other how to breathe again. Down the hallway, the floor creaked. Taejun stood in the hallway, rubbing his eyes. "Appa? Amma?" Ji-won turned, startled. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" "I had a bad dream," he whispered. Junho walked to him and knelt down. "What did you dream about?" "That you were gone again." Ji-won's breath caught. Junho gathered him in his arms, holding him close. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, voice breaking. "Not ever again." The boy rested his head against his father's shoulder. Ji-won stood behind them, a hand to her mouth, as quiet tears finally spilled. But even in the calm, she felt it, the tremor beneath the surface. She knew it couldn't stay quiet forever. After the kids left for school, Ji-won stepped outside for some air. The apricot tree swayed, light filtering through its thinning branches. She sat on the bench beneath it, the one her grandmother used to sit on when she was a girl. Junho followed minutes later. He carried a small folder. When she looked up, he was already sitting beside her. "What's that?" she asked. "I was going through old files last night," he said, offering the folder. "And I found something." She opened it slowly. Inside were several photos from his private collection. The kind the press never saw. The kind taken when they were still new, still laughing in ways that didn't need to be forced. One picture showed Ji-won asleep on his shoulder in a car, sunlight streaking through the window. Another, their first anniversary, her eyes bright, her smile carefree. And the last, her standing in the apartment hallway, holding a grocery bag in one hand and a pregnancy test in the other. Her breath hitched. "You kept this." "I found it tucked in a drawer, behind a stack of reports," he said softly. "I don't even remember putting it there. But when I saw it..." His voice trailed off. She touched the image gently, her thumb brushing across her younger self's face. "I remember that day. I thought you'd be angry." "I remember too," he whispered. "I wasn't angry. I was scared. And instead of saying that, I left you alone with it." She closed the folder and held it to her chest. "You're trying, Jun-ho," she said quietly. "I see it, and I feel it. But it doesn't erase the days I begged the ceiling for answers. Or the nights I whispered your name and hated myself for it." "I know," he replied. "But every moment I missed, I want to spend the rest of my life earning back." Before she could respond, the sound of small feet running broke the stillness. So-hyun came sprinting out of the house, holding a paper in her hand. "Amma, Appa," she shouted. "Look what I made at school." They smiled. Ji-won opened her arms and caught her daughter in a hug. The girl held up a drawing, crayon figures of 5 people holding hands under a bright yellow sun. "That's us," So-hyun said proudly. "And the sun is our happy." Jun-ho knelt beside her. "Our happy," she nodded seriously. "It only comes out when everyone's together." Ji-won met his eyes. The smile she gave him then, small, fragile, real, felt like sunlight cracking through a storm cloud. But that night, something shifted. The kids were asleep. The hallway dim. Ji-won walked into the kitchen for a glass of water. She stopped. There, by the door, taped to the inside of the glass, was a note. No envelope, just a folded piece of paper. She peeled it off with trembling fingers. The message was printed in the same hand as the one from before. "You can pretend for them, but I see your fear. You won't last." She dropped the note. Her chest tightened. The walls tilted. "Ji-won." Jun-ho's voice cut through the silence as he entered the room. "What is it?" She couldn't speak, just pointed. He picked up the note. "Read it once, then again." His jaw locked. "Where did this come from?" he asked. "I don't know," she whispered. "It wasn't there earlier. I swear it wasn't." "She's been in here," he said, already pulling out his phone. "She's getting bolder." "Call the police," Ji-won said, her voice shaking now. "Please, now." He did. Minutes passed in agonizing stillness. Jun-ho stood by the front door, pacing. Ji-won sat at the table, her arms around her knees like she was trying to make herself smaller, safer. When the officers arrived, they took photos, dusted for prints, asked questions. But Ji-won already knew what they'd say. There were no cameras in the kitchen, no witnesses, no forced entry, no proof, just fear. Just the feeling of eyes where there shouldn't be any. When they were gone, Jun-ho knelt beside her. "I'm moving you and the kids to the countryside for a few days," he said. "My aunt has a cottage. It's secure, remote. No one knows about it." "And you?" she asked. "I'll stay here," he said. "I need to deal with her." Ji-won gripped his wrist. "She's not playing games anymore. Don't give her the chance to destroy what's left." "I'm not walking into her trap," he promised. "I'm walking through it, so I can end it." She leaned her forehead against his. "Come back to us." "I will." Her eyes filled, but she didn't let the tears fall. "I won't lose you again," she whispered. She stood by the window each evening, watching the fading sun and wondering if Jun-ho was safe. He called once a day. He never said much. just enough to let her know he was alive. Until the fourth day, there was no call. Ji-won waited, phone in hand long past midnight. Her mind spun in spirals, and the longer the silence stretched, the more her chest began to close in. Then, just before dawn, her phone rang. She answered before the first ring ended. Junho? His voice was hoarse. I'm okay. She exhaled like she'd been underwater for hours. Where have you been? Why didn't you? She came to the house, he said. Ji-won's blood ran cold. What? I confronted her. I needed to end it. Are you hurt? She asked quickly. No, he said, then paused. But she is. Ji-won gripped the edge of the window. What happened? He hesitated. She tried to run. I had a private investigator waiting nearby. We cornered her before she reached the car. Was she armed? No, just angry, desperate. She screamed, said things I can't repeat. She said if she couldn't have my name, she'd make sure you and the kids never wanted it either. Ji-won sat down slowly, hand trembling. She meant every word. She always did. Is she in custody? He nodded even though she couldn't see. They arrested her last night on fraud, trespassing, and unauthorized access to medical records. There's enough evidence now to press charges. Ji-won didn't speak for a moment, and then her voice, soft, shaking. It's over. Legally? Almost. But emotionally, he paused. I know it'll take longer. Ji-won leaned her head back against the wall. You're coming here, right? You'll be with us. I'll be there before breakfast. And he was. By the time the kettle started to sing, his car pulled up to the cottage. She opened the door before he could knock. He stood on the porch, eyes tired, hair unkempt, but there was peace in his face, the kind that only comes after a battle has finally been named and faced. Ji-won didn't hesitate. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, tightly, desperately. He pulled her against him and buried his face in her shoulder. I thought I lost you again, she whispered. You won't. The children ran to the doorway, squealing when they saw him. Appa, Taejun shouted. You came back. He knelt, opened his arms, and they crashed into him, all three. So-hyun clutched his hand. Can we go home now? Junho looked at Ji-won. She met his eyes, then nodded. That afternoon, they returned to the house. It was exactly as they left it, but it felt different now, like the air itself had been reset. No more shadows lurking in the corners. No more notes taped to windows. Just the creak of familiar floors, the scent of their kitchen, the laughter of children filling the spaces that had once echoed with silence. As evening fell, Ji-won stood in the backyard watching the apricot tree sway again. But this time, it felt like it was dancing. Junho stepped beside her. He held something in his hand, a small velvet box. She turned to him, brow furrowed. What's that? It's not what you think, he said quickly. No rings, no pressure, just this. He opened the box. Inside was a necklace, delicate, silver, with a tiny charm in the shape of 5 stars. One for each of them. It's a promise, he said. Not for what we were, not for what we might become, but for what we are right now. She stared at it, and her eyes filled. It's beautiful, she whispered. He fastened it around her neck gently, his fingers lingering on her skin. Can I ask you something? He said softly. She nodded. Do you think you'll ever be able to love me again? She turned to him, searching his face. I never stopped, she said. I just forgot how to feel it without hurting. He exhaled, voice cracking. And now, I'm remembering, she whispered. They stood there as the sky shifted from gold to indigo, the children chasing fireflies just beyond the steps. She turned. Junho was beside her, on the floor mattress they'd laid out for him. They hadn't shared a bed yet, not out of rejection, but of unspoken caution, a mutual understanding that healing couldn't be rushed. But tonight, something in the air shifted. Not romance, not desire, just need. Are you awake? She whispered. He didn't answer right away. Then, yes. She sat up slowly. The light from the hallway cast a soft line across the floor. He turned toward her, eyes meeting hers in the dim. "I keep thinking," she began, then hesitated. "There's still so much I don't know about you. About what happened when you left. What you felt. What you did. I only know my version." He nodded. "And you deserve mine." She pulled her knees to her chest. "Why her?" The question hung in the air like a ghost. Junho sat up as well, back against the wall, arms crossed loosely in front of him. He didn't speak for a long time. "She wasn't you," he finally said. "That's the truth. That's not an answer. I didn't choose her instead of you," he said. "I chose her to escape you, or more precisely, to escape how much I hated myself around you." Ji-won blinked. "You hated yourself?" He nodded. "You were strong. You were patient. You had so much hope, even when I didn't deserve it. And every day, I woke up and saw the reflection of the man I was supposed to be in your eyes. Terrified me, because I wasn't that man yet. I was scared I'd never be." She swallowed hard. "Minji was easy," he continued. "She didn't challenge me. She praised me for being exactly who I was: broken, selfish, shallow. She told me I didn't need to change. So I believed her, because it was easier than standing next to someone who saw more in me than I could see in myself." Ji-won looked down at her hands. "And the children?" she asked. "Did you think about them during those 3 years?" "Every day," he said. "But thinking about them meant thinking about what I'd done. And I wasn't brave enough for that. So I buried them. I buried you. And I buried the man I used to be." Her eyes brimmed with tears. "I used to tell Taejun that you were away building something important. I didn't want him to believe he'd been left. I didn't just leave," Junho whispered. "I abandoned. There's a difference. And I carry that shame with me now, every time I look at them." Ji-won was quiet for a long time. Then she reached over and placed her hand gently over his. "I don't need a perfect man," she said. "I need a present one." He looked at her, his expression a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. "I am here," he said. "Then stay," she replied, her voice barely audible. He didn't ask what she meant. He simply rose from the floor, crossed the small distance between them, and lay beside her. Not as a man reclaiming something, but as someone willing to rebuild it piece by piece, from the ground up. No promises, no grand declarations, just the warmth of her hand in his beneath the sheets, and the silence of forgiveness settling gently in the space between their hearts. But just as the moment softened into something still and sacred, Ji-won's phone buzzed. They both froze. She reached over and picked it up. An unknown number. One message. She opened it. Her breath caught. "What is it?" Junho asked. She showed him the screen. "There's something you need to know. Meet me at the address below. Come alone. A friend." Below, a pin drop on a map. An industrial area. One they both recognized. "Is it a trap?" Junho asked, eyes already narrowing. Ji-won stared at the screen, her heart racing. "I don't know." "Then you're not going alone." She shook her head. "Who would send this now? After everything?" They sat in silence for a long moment. Ji-won reread the message again, and again, and then she whispered, almost to herself, "What if this isn't the end? What if there's more?" Junho met her eyes. "Then we finish it," he said. "Together. Always." Ji-won sat beside Junho, her fingers clenched tightly in her lap. The message still echoed in her thoughts. Come alone. But she hadn't. She couldn't. "Do you think it's someone connected to her?" she asked, breaking the silence. "It could be," Junho replied. "Or maybe someone she wronged. People like her. They always leave collateral damage." The car slowed near the pinned location. An old factory lot. Rusted fences. A single light flickering above a side door. Ji-won exhaled shakily. "Let me go first." Junho looked at her. "No, we go in together." She hesitated. "But what if it's someone who only trusts me?" "I don't trust anyone who lures you out in the dark," he said. "They want something. And we won't give it to them unless we know what game we're walking into. She nodded. Together, they stepped out of the car, shoes crunching against gravel. The night air was sharp, cutting through her sweater. She held her phone tightly, light from the screen guiding her toward the rusted door. Junho stepped forward first and knocked. A few seconds later, it creaked open. The man who answered looked nothing like a threat. He was thin, mid-30s maybe, with sunken eyes and a twitch in his fingers like someone used to hiding. He stepped back and gestured them in. "You came," he said. "Who are you?" Ji-won asked, voice steady despite her nerves. "My name's Hwan. I worked for her." "Min-ji." He nodded. "Not directly. I was part of her cleanup team. Digital mostly. I wiped files, altered records, sometimes delivered things. Messages." Junho narrowed his eyes. "And now you want to help us?" "She's going to hurt someone else," Hwan said. "Someone worse than you." Ji-won felt her stomach twist. "What do you mean?" "She has recordings," he said, walking toward a table and pulling out a small hard drive. "Security footage, voice memos, screenshots, from your home, the hospital, even your children's school." Ji-won's knees nearly buckled. "She was building something," Hwan continued. "A narrative, twisting everything to look like you were unstable, that you were neglecting the kids. She wanted to prove you were unfit." "No," Ji-won whispered. "Why would she?" "To take them," Hwan said. "She had plans to file a private petition, claim you were dangerous, that the children would be safer under state protection, or worse, with her." Ji-won gasped. "She would have tried to take my children?" She believed if she couldn't keep Junho, she'd take what mattered to him most. Junho's jaw clenched. "How do we stop this?" "She's in custody," Hwan said. "But that won't last. She has lawyers, money, influence. You think this ends because she's in a cell? No, she'll manipulate. From behind glass if she has to." Ji-won stared at the drive. "What's on there?" "Everything," Hwan said. "Proof of her plan, of her lies, and of what she did to you." Junho stepped forward and took the drive. "Why now? Why help us?" "Because I was supposed to deliver something else tomorrow," Hwan said, lowering his voice. "Something worse, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't look at myself anymore." Ji-won's voice cracked. "What was it?" "A forged letter," he said, "written to look like you wrote it, confessing to harming one of your kids." She staggered back. "No," she whispered. "She wouldn't." "She would," Junho said darkly. "She already planned it. She wanted the courts to intervene," Hwan said. "Get you declared unstable. Strip custody. Once the children were taken, she'd petition to act as guardian." Ji-won turned away, one hand against the cold wall, breath shallow and ragged. I can't breathe." Junho rushed to her, hands on her shoulders. "Ji-won, look at me. Breathe." She blinked rapidly, her chest rising in.